Hello and welcome to episode 43 of the DX Mentor, the upcoming DXPedition in Jarvis Island. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bill, AJAB. If this is the first time you're joining us, welcome. We have a back catalog of over 40 episodes covering many aspects of DXing in both podcast and YouTube format. Please check us out. If you're new to DXing, I would really recommend episode 1 as it was recorded with several world-class DXers. You will get a feel of the excitement that goes with chasing DX. Remember, if you like what you find, please subscribe, like, and share. I would like to acknowledge an email I received from Jim, N8ECI. Jim has passed along some excellent suggestions in the past, and this was a great email. Thanks for your support, Jim. If you're in the Ohio, Kentucky, or Indiana area, I would like to invite you to stop by the Cincinnati Hamfest. The event will be held on August 10th and will run from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Claremont County Fairgrounds. I will have a table in the inside area and would love to have you stop by and let's talk DX and just say hello. Our guest today is Don Greenbaum, N1DG, and the topic is the upcoming DXPedition to Jarvis Island. Jarvis has not been activated for 32 years, and the demand will be great, especially in Europe. We'll also have a conversation about whether or not Jarvis could be considered its own DX entity, separate from Palmyra. So without any further delay, let's get started. Well, good evening and welcome to the latest edition of the DX Mentor. I'm Bill, AJB, your host, and we're really excited to have a guest tonight who is a world-renowned DXer and entrepreneur and all-around good guy and great operator. And he's going to be talking to us about an upcoming DXPedition at Jarvis Island. We're really excited about a number of aspects of that, and I can't wait to get into it. So Joe, why don't you start us off? We have Joe, W8GEX, and then our special guest is Don, N1DG. So Joe, go ahead.
Well, thanks, Bill, and welcome aboard again, Don. He's participated with us before. Don and I was on Midway together years ago. So we go way, way back on this DXing thing. So it's a pleasure to have you with us tonight, Don.
Thanks for inviting me. This will be fun, I hope.
So Don, tell us, give us the 30,000-foot view of your DX journey so far.
Well, licensed in 1962. I'm at the top of the honor roll. My challenge score is 3192. DX is what I live for. I've been to about 20 places over the years. I really enjoy going to the Pacific. My first big DXPedition was Wake Island in 1995. As Joe mentioned, he and I in 2009 were on Midway. 2018, I hit another KH when we went to Baker Island. And I've done a few in Asia and Africa. And I'm really looking forward to Jarvis. It's been on my hit list for a very long time.
Well, I'm excited that you're going. From what I could tell, it's been 34 years since it's been activated.
Right, 34 years. Eric Skase organized a trip there, and Fish and Wildlife has not wanted anybody else setting foot on the island. They've gone through a couple of eradications of non-native species, sort of like what they're doing on Curie now, and even Midway, they're eradicating mice. Johnston, they went through a couple of years of getting rid of crazy fire ants. So, I mean, they're very careful about letting people on the islands.
Wow. And one of the things, I guess, that's been in your favor to get permission is the ribbon of box. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. What we did when we were on Baker was test a prototype of it. And it was clear that they were not happy with the tents we had and the latrines and the many, many trips over the reef to supply all the food and fuel and water. And this idea seems to overcome their fear of the impact on the ecosystem by having a campground. We had a dozen people, plus the U.S. Fish and Wildlife people on Baker. Midway, it doesn't really matter because there's a permanent base there, and but if you're looking at Johnston or Curie, where there's no native or even military or fish and wildlife base, they've worked very hard to put the ecosystem back to what it was before man came along and put in other plant species and animal species. For a while, there were almost no birds left on Curie or on Johnston or even Jarvis and Baker, and now there are millions of birds there because nature finds a way to go back to what it should be.
Well, so to discuss, to make people understand the significance, if you're going to take 12 people onto an island, right, for a 10 or 12-day period, you have to take everything they could possibly need and then take everything that they have left over completely off the island. So we're talking about, when you talk about
including human waste.
right, I was about to say, so when you're talking about a latrine, that's going with you when you leave.
That is correct.
But all the food, all the drink, I mean, it's just hard for me to imagine all the stuff you got to get together and anticipate for, let's say, 10 days or 2 weeks. So
right. And then if you have bad weather, you can't even get on the island.
Yeah.
Because you have to go over a reef in a little, skiff, a little raft.
right.
Got it.
No, and so my other point was, though, if you now have this device that we're calling a rib, you put the transmitter and the supporting equipment for just the transmitter on the island, and then you guys are sitting some amount of space in the lagoon, for instance, controlling it via that. So there really is never a human presence for more than an hour or two, let's say, and then there's just a box sitting there.
That is correct. And more importantly, AA7JV has built a landing craft, a very low profile landing craft with the generators and the radios on, all pre-staged. So he drives this, and pictures of it are on our website, jarvisisland2024.com. You can see this little boat that he built. When he drives it up on the beach, all the radios, all the generators, all the connectivity to the boat, all that stuff stays on that little boat. So we reach the island, we have to put up half a dozen antennas, roll out the coax, start up the generators, and we're on the air. When he left Ducey Island, from the time they left the boat to the time they were back on the boat with everything, it was less than 2 hours.
Yeah.
So there's very little to clean up and very little presence when we are operating.
Wow.
So Don,
Plus, we take 5 people on the boat and have about 20 odd people from around the world remoting to the boat to control the radios. And it becomes extremely cost effective and efficient.
Go ahead, Joe.
so how many ribs do you plan to have on Jarvis?
6. 2 will be only used by the people on the boat, and 4, 2 CW and 2 FT8 will be manned 24/7 by hams in the US, Europe, and Asia.
Okay, so Don, can you tell us a little bit about scheduling these operators all over the world to remote in? Tell us a little something. How does that all work?
It's like herding cats. But what we did for Ducey is I created a Google spreadsheet that was shared by everybody. We had 2-hour time periods mapped out by day. People would put in the slots they want and the bands they want. And before a shift, everybody checks who else is operating. The other thing, because we have N1MM, you'll be able to look as the remote operator and see where all the other stations are. So we don't have 6 stations on one band.
Yeah, sure. And another question that just came to mind, will you guys be on live stream?
No. Because of 4 remote operators, the bandwidth on Starlink, the less you have going over the internet, the more efficient it is.
Sure.
So we're going to streamline the data, especially on CW where you've got latency. You really don't want a lot of packets needlessly going. And personally, I think there are too many crutches for the audience chasing DX. You have packet cluster. Now you see your QSO about 30 seconds or 13 seconds after you make the queue. Whatever happened to working rare DX, finding them by tuning the band, and then waiting for your QSL? I think it's gotten too easy, but I'm old, so what can I tell you?
Yeah.
But I thought part of it was that it would cut down on the number of insurance contacts that people were making, right? So,
well, if you look at the statistics for a couple of DXPeditions that just finished, like the guys down on Easter Island, what did they get, like 10% dupes?
yeah, that's what they said. You're right.
So how does live stream cut down on dupes?
But they also said, several of them have said, if you're not sure you're in the log, work us again.
Yeah.
Correct.
So they're kind of defeating.
But again, if you have live stream, there shouldn't be any doubt, right?
No, you're right.
Yeah.
But people still do. When we were on Baker, I had one guy every morning call us to say, how you guys doing today? So, there's nothing wrong with a dupe. And we're there 12 days with radios on the air 24/7. We're at the top of the cycle this summer. I think we'll be easy to work. And I think we're not going for a record of QSOs. So we're going to concentrate on Europe, where, phone in Germany is like number 2. Phone in Europe, in England, is like number 2. This thing's rarer than Bouvet in Europe.
Wow.
So we need to concentrate on quality cues, not Joe Sixpack wanting to find out what the weather is today on Jarvis.
Yeah.
We'll get some of them, and that's fine.
So going backwards a little bit, what are the current dates?
Yeah.
We are leaving American Samoa on the 1st of August. We should be set up ready to go on the 5th of August. Our permit is good for a month in case we get delayed, but we're only allowed on the air for 12 days.
Okay.
It took us 2 days to get set up on Baker and another day to tear down. We're going to be operational in a couple of hours, and the teardown will be a couple of hours. So that's more time we need to set up and do non-operational mechanics.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
one thing that Joe pointed out a few podcasts ago never occurred to me, because I've never been in one of these islands, but by the time you guys get there, there's all this pressure to get on the air as quickly as possible, right? So you're lugging all this equipment, you're getting it set up, you're not really used to 104 degrees in the shade. So by the time you actually have everything up and operational, you're exhausted. So now you're going to go all week on a minimum of food, minimum of hydration, minimum of sleep, and then you're going to burn it hard trying to tear everything down. And you're just flat exhausted. So this sounds to me like a huge upside, right? To not have to go through that.
If you go to the Baker Island website, we have a bunch of pictures. At the end, the whole crew is sitting in the dining room asleep on various chairs. When we're done, we're not going to be in that rundown condition, which means our QSOs are higher quality. We'll be in an air-conditioned boat with food being served, and there are 5 of us there. We'll get those 2 stations on the air around the clock.
Wow. Go
So
ahead, Joe.
Don, what's your antenna systems? Are they all verticals?
Yes, Fish and Wildlife has mandated, just like Midway
Yes.
and Baker, and frankly, verticals work better on the ocean.
Yes.
We will have a 6-meter beam, but it's going to be vertically polarized.
Oh.
Huh.
Which,
Okay.
frankly, given the reflection off the water, might actually work better. I'm curious to see how that works.
Yeah.
Joe, did he say 60-meter beam or 6-meter beam? I missed that.
Well, for Joe, he heard 60, but I said 6.
Okay, all right. You brought up Baker Island, and I've been doing this for a while, but not nearly the level you guys had. So I had to get the atlas out, and I started doing a little digging. And what surprised me is that Jarvis is, I don't know, 1,500 miles, I think, from Hawaii.
Correct.
But it's included with Baker, and I'm just curious as
No,
to
no, it's
Jar-
included with Palmyra.
or Palmyra. That's right, with Palmyra. So why would that be? Is there something I don't understand, or?
There's something a lot of people don't understand, but back in the 1930s, when the DXCC was created, it was Jarvis. It didn't even include Palmyra. And then after World War II, it was Palmyra and Jarvis as one entity. It boggles the mind when you look at Desecheo, which you can see from Puerto Rico. Swains Island is a couple of 100 miles off American Samoa and controlled by American Samoa. You can look at the DXCC list and wonder why these islands, some of them are a third the distance from Jarvis. The DXAC committee last summer looked at this, and in their report to the board, they say, well, we don't know why they're lumped together, because there were no records in 1946 or whenever post World War II DXCC started again. And they said they're the same island group, which is negated by 2013, the US State Department and the government of Kiribati agreed to new territorial claims. And if you look at a NOAA map and a US Fish and Wildlife map, Kiribati bisects the line between Jarvis and Palmyra. I mean, Kiribati's right in there. The other thing is, both NOAA and Fish and Wildlife consider them separate reserves. So the Department of Interior breaks them as separate controlled entities. And lastly, if you apply to the US Fish and Wildlife people for a permit to go to Palmyra, they say it's off limits to ham radio. They do not own the island of Palmyra. That's owned by the Nature Conservancy. So if you want to go to Palmyra, you have to fly to it. You're not allowed to step foot in the reserve that US Fish and Wildlife has. So you cannot get a permit from US Fish and Wildlife to go to Palmyra. You can only get it to go to Jarvis. I get emails all the time saying, have you applied to the DXAC for a separate entity? Because it doesn't make sense. It's not a separate entity. And we have. And there was a meeting in April, which I attended, where I was invited to make the case that Palmyra and Jarvis are separated by land of Kiribati or territory of Kiribati,
Okay.
and that Palmyra and Jarvis basically to operate ham radio are two different groups. But I don't make the DXCC rules,
Right.
so it's still rare. There are still going to be pileups. We're
It
still
is.
going to be busy, but imagine the excitement if a new entity was added to the list. I mean, we're all at the top of the honor roll. There's nothing new to work, and hasn't been, by the way, since Kosovo. And when the league approved Kosovo, DXAC had voted against it.
Wow.
So the league decided, for whatever reason, even though Kosovo didn't have internationally recognized borders, they had an area code for their telephone number. They added that to the list. Frankly, I think 1,500 miles from Hawaii should be a separate entity, but that's just me.
So,
Well,
Don, is there anything that the amateur community can do to help make this a new DXCC?
I don't know, sit-ins, go to Newington, set up tents.
Don't go to Columbia. I know that. I literally was going to ask the same question. Can we write?
Yeah, write to your director.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's start but
All right.
I think that's how Kosovo happened. I think everybody started writing to their director, and the league overrode DXAC.
So I'll tell you what I'll do. In our show notes, I will draft a letter that people can copy and paste, an email that they can copy and paste and drop in as the content. And I mean, if we've got a little over 1,000 people now subscribed between YouTube and our podcast. So if they get 1,100, emails, may not make any difference, but what the heck? So
It doesn't hurt.
yeah, it'll make me feel better.
Yeah.
You bring up a good point though, because if like you guys are all sitting on top of the honor roll, I'm to the point where the only way I'm going to get new ones other than Macau is going to be DXPeditions. So I'm kind of on hold, right? And not honor roll, but not far. So now it's like, okay, now I got to wait and just hope some of these things pop up. So if there was a refresh, an open-minded refresh, that's my words, no one else's, to take a look and say, okay, these, we're not going to take anything off because that's not right, but maybe we need to look and say, we had these set of rules. The grandfather works both ways, right? So you grandfather somebody in, like Mount Athos, I think is a fair to entity that was grandfathered in that may not pass muster today, but let's assume it might. But you can't grandfather something in that goes against the rules. That's not right. So maybe it does have to have a review. So I'll take that upon myself. You don't have to say a word, but I'll put something out. And but to your point, the overall point is it's going to be a heck of a DXPedition with a lot of activity. And I'm just excited for you. And we kind of went a couple different ways here. One thing I'm really go ahead, Joe. You got a question?
Well, I was just going to ask him, and maybe I ought to wait on this, but I was going to ask Don about the radio equipment on the boat. Is there anything special about what you're using on the boat, Don?
So the way, so there are 6,500 flex radios in the ribs. They're controlled on the boat by the onboard operators with maestros. The remote operators remote through Starlink into a computer. On FT8, it's very straightforward because they're just seeing the WSJTX software on their screen with any desk as if they were sitting in front of the radio. The 900 megahertz link from the boat, the magnet, to the computers in the ribs that will send the audio for CW, or the Maestro handles the audio for phone by the operators on the boat. So on the boat, there are no radios. There are heads, either computers or the Maestros.
No.
Interesting.
All the radios are on the island.
You know.
So the one question I had, or many, but the one that I was trying to sort out a little bit was, several years ago, we had Greg Marco came up with a rib and came to our W8 DXCC and showed it off a little bit. And at the time, he said that it appeared that the DXCC or the DXAC would have no issues with it because it would be a transmitter on the island, and that turned out to be true. But he was concerned at the time that IOTA would have issues because there aren't really people on the island. And that is what I thought was going on until, what did I read, that sideband QSOs, or there's some kind of a compromise that was been reached, right?
Right. So we've been talking to the IOTA people for a year now. And to give them credit, they have been flexible in approving QSOs made by the islands, by the operators just offshore. Remember, technically, we're still in the reef. We are in the reserve.
Okay.
So the radios are on the island.
Mhm.
Operators are very close to shore. And so all QSOs made by the 5 of us on the boat will count for IOTA. And since all sideband cues are made by boat operators, that's easy. You don't have to worry about, if you made a cue, was I working an operator on the boat? The other thing we will do is the CW operators on the boat will send some identifier every so often, like a call and IOTA. So you'll know you're working an onboard operator.
Okay.
If you're making an FT8Q, the following morning, it'll be on Club Log with the daily logs, and you know, if you hover a mouse over the greenie,
Mhm.
it'll tell you who the operator is. And that may mean you may have worked a non-IOTA, or Parks on the Air has the same rule now. You may have to work us again, but very few people only work the DXPedition once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's great to hear that they're being open-minded and giving it a shot.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand they don't want somebody in Chicago operating a radio and not count for IOTA. Those count for DXCC.
Right.
I mean, you could, I think K1ZZ once said that you could operate from the moon and it would count, as long as the radio is where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, that's right. Wow. Well, that's great. That's actually great. I did notice the station config is on the web. It's
Right.
on your web page. That's really interesting going through that. And having followed this over several years, you can see how it developed. So do you think, it might be a loaded question, and I would never want you to answer something that you shouldn't answer, and you wouldn't, but do you think this, assuming this goes as well as I'm absolutely convinced it'll go, this might open up some of the other US FW islands that we can't currently get to anymore?
There's a number of islands that they don't want a dozen hams visiting. It's not just US Fish and Wildlife. It's other entities run by the French Overseas Division, TAF. There are other islands where New Zealand doesn't want to have a ship of operators come and interfere with the wildlife. We have 3 fish and wildlife people joining us on this trip.
No.
Wow.
When we made the presentation to go there, they immediately focused on the fact that we said, we're not going to have a camp. We're not going to have latrines. We're not going to have people. So I believe this will open the door to other locations. There's also one other thing. We've been working very closely for 3 years with Fish and Wildlife to get the permission. And I've served on a committee with Fish and Wildlife since Baker. And they don't view ham radio as a negative anymore, because they've seen what we can do technologically to reduce the footprint. When we were on Baker, we cleaned up the island. We had like 24 bags of trash. We met all the rules they imposed. There's no bad impression at the current people running Hawaii Fish and Wildlife against ham radio.
Wow. Well done. Jeez. It's amazing how many moving parts you have, and you just can't hop in a boat and go somewhere.
Now, does that mean we're going to get on Curie? That's not run by Fish and Wildlife. That's the state of Hawaii.
Okay.
So we have to make the case to those people that we were just in Jarvis, and look what we did without leaving a footprint, because Curie's even rarer. Johnston is a different animal because it's run by the Air Force, and it's very hard to get the Pentagon to allow people to visit an island that they might need in the future, and they just don't want us there.
Yeah. I got to give you credit, because we've had a couple conversations over the years, and every time you've talked about Fish and Wildlife, you've always had a lot of respect for them. You've never looked at them as an obstacle, but more of a, here's a partner, and maybe if they understand us better, and maybe if we understand them better, we come to some common ground. And then they have you say that they have these islands where there's now millions of birds that have returned, and the ants are gone, and the rats are gone, and I respect you for that, because you've always had the right attitude. Any other attitude never would have gotten this resolved. So hats off to you for that.
Yeah, for sure. So Don, is it safe to assume that Curie could be coming up as far as a rib operation, do you think?
If it comes up, it will only be a rib operation.
Yes.
Will it come up?
Who knows?
Who knows? I've been working on that and not only me, but we've been working on that longer than we've been working on Jarvis.
Wow. So Joe, it's premature to ask about 60 meters. I'm just going to burst your bubble.
but look at it this way. Jarvis is 1,500 miles from Hawaii. Curie is 55 miles from Midway.
Yes.
They're both controlled by the state of Hawaii.
Wow. Okay.
You could swim to Curie. Well, George might be able to swim from Curie. I can't.
You would drive.
Wow. So I will put in the show notes the Jarvis Island 2024.com website. It's really well done, and it's really got some great stuff on it. And that was cool. And I'm looking over my notes. I don't think I have anything else for you. Who are the operators that'll be on the boat, though? We should at least name them and thank
Absolutely. So it's George Wallner, AA7JV, Tomas Petrick, HA2NA. No, HA7RY. I'm sorry. HA2NA is our webmaster. Myself, Adrian, KO8SCA, and Mike Snow, KN4EEI, who was with us on Baker. and he is one of the people who helps run the boat. And he's done an awful lot of the fabrication on the ribs and the boat rib that I described earlier. The other thing I'd like to mention is when you go to our website, look at the history section that we did on Jarvis Island. Jarvis Island has been on the air a lot of times pre-World War II. It was colonized by a bunch of Hawaiians. And one of them even got killed. Well, he didn't get killed. He caught his appendix burst. And before they can get him off, he died. One of the people on the other islands was killed by the Japanese when it was bombed. But these Hawaiians went out there pre-World War II, and they all had ham radio operators along for communications.
No kidding.
Ah,
I gotta go check that out.
yeah, didn't know that.
And those QSLs are on the Jarvis Island website.
Ah.
So to take a slight tack, I know that Greg has been working on like the next gen rib, which seems to be, is that basically the same thing, or is that a different configuration?
It's a different configuration. It's not something you can leave on an island. Well, maybe you can, but it's the rib as we built it for these islands means you can plop it there and totally leave it as its own unit. The rib is very robust. The rib they're taking to, they just announced, it's not.
I'm brain dead, yeah.
What?
I'm brain dead, but I know
Yes,
what you're
yes.
talking about.
CRS. They're going to be there operating next to the ribs.
Okay.
So the rib allows more operators to use the stations they set up, but it's like on on Juan Fernandez Island, there were always people there to restart it, to do the maintenance. So it's a much smaller footprint. On Juan Fernandez, it ran off the island power grid. Different lower cost rib idea with the same purpose, more operators, less footprint.
Okay.
But they're totally different uses.
Okay, cool. Very.
So, Don, the ribs that you're taking to Jarvis, what are their gasoline consumption per day?
On Ducey, we have a great chart. It was about a gallon a day.
A gallon a day?
Gallon a day?
Well, you're only running basically computers and radios.
So what size generator are you taking?
They're the 2000 watt
What?
in echo mode.
Wow.
So what George did is he puts in these large batteries. And if you've ever used a generator and you hit a linear, the generator immediately cycles up and cycles down, it cycles up and cycles down. We draw the power from these very large batteries. And the generator is always charging the battery, not feeding the radios. And only 2 of the radios have linears. The other 4 are running 100 watts. Because on CW and FT8 on an island,
Yeah.
that's enough.
Holy smokes. So when you guys had gone previously, I would imagine what, a quarter the weight that you'd have to take would be in barrels of fuel? Is that,
Oh,
or drums of fuel?
Boy, I wish I had this chart up. I'll send you the chart, which you can put in the podcast
Okay.
afterwards. But the amount of fuel we use is, I mean, remember when we were on Baker, you had tents with lights, you had cooking, hot stoves,
Oh, yeah.
you had all the computer network. We had 2 generators just for the meet and greet tent. We had 3 generators, 1 for each operating tent. We didn't have the batteries to keep the generators from cycling up and down. So the usage of fuel is no longer a concern. Now, a gallon a day is still, and all these generators have external fuel tanks on top. So let's say we can't make a quick trip to an island because of weather for a day. You can run these generators 48 hours before they have to be topped up.
Wow. Well, and I'm thinking of the cost. The cost
Oh,
savings.
the whole dynamic of this trip between you don't need 7 operators you would normally need, you don't need all the food, you don't need all the trips back and forth to feed the people, the tables, the chairs, the tents. You take all that out, and we use the Magnet, which is George Wallner's boat that saves a lot of money. But you could do this off another charter boat, again, with much less logistics and cost.
Wow. Really great idea.
Yeah, tremendous idea. George has really changed the way this all works. Oh my God, yes.
Huh. Wow. Well, Joe, did I miss anything?
Well, I don't think so.
Well,
This-
it is so cool.
Yeah, this is just very, very interesting. Here's a new DXPedition, all new technology going out there. And this guy, Don, has been a big part of this show, as well as so many other DXPeditions that he's been on. So I've got a lot of respect for this guy.
Yeah, I do.
I give him a lot of trouble, but that's okay.
Yeah.
As long as you give me trouble and a beer, that's fine.
So the big question, though, aside from 60 meters, is what do we do to get Don on the moon so that we can? I mean, we talked to a friend of yours today. Actually, he said to tell you hi, Dave, KJ9I.
Oh,
And
Yes.
we
And
did a
I didn't realize that you was on moon bounce till he told us.
oh, that's my current passion.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, we did a podcast with him. We recorded on EME on 6 meters, and your name came up, and then it did occur to me afterwards, like, half of your strength is, half of it's used on the way up, half on the way down. But if somebody were actually on the moon, then I don't need the antennas I thought I previously did.
It's not a DXCC entity.
Oh, not
Oh,
yet.
geez.
Oh,
Here we go again.
yeah, we're not going to go there.
No, I think we've covered a lot. This has been very, very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And Don, you're always gracious to give us your time, and I really appreciate it. It really helps us out and helps us get the word out. I'm going to send you something that I'd like you to, and I don't know, tonight or first thing in the morning, if you'll read it, that'll be the contents I'll put on the show notes. So if anyone's really interested in trying to get a groundswell of support here for a new one, I hope they'll read it and they'll send it to their director. But I always want to be factually correct, and I'll send that.
I'll send you the exact fuel usage on Ducey Island, which we just completed, and that will show the use per generator.
Yeah, that's just fascinating.
Don, since this is going to be a big DXPedition, and so many guys will need it for a new one. So obviously they're going to be in the Pileup trying to work you guys. And then there will be other operators that have worked Jarvis, Palmyra. And so some of these guys would want to work you on every band slot. So what's your recommendation to us on working? Should we really work all these band slots with you when so many people need you for an all-time new one?
So one thing we will not have is the leaderboard, because there are guys that will work us 30 times to be on top of that leaderboard. By leaving the leaderboard off, the incentive to hog the QSOs, so you're number one for a non-award, will give more people a chance to
Yes,
work us. We turned the leaderboard off on Baker as well, and the percentage of unique calls was much higher than most of the expeditions.
Wow.
yeah. I think that's a good thing that you done. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for doing that.
Yeah, that's knowing your audience, and because we're all competitive, right? That's why we're in there banging around. So
Well, that's right.
Yeah,
And it's never been on FT8, so you know those pileups are going to be crazy.
yeah, that is going to be nuts.
It's very wanted on digital. So there's that. It's the IOTA chasers. It's the Parks on the Air chasers.
Wow.
And it's my buddy Joe that will call in every morning and just ask how the weather is today. And I don't mean GEX, but there is another Joe who, wherever I go, just cracks the pile up just so he can say good morning, Don. He knows who he is.
He's got a 200-foot tower with a huge
Let's put it
LPA
this
on
way. He doesn't call long.
Yeah.
Wow. So not just first in the log, but first in the morning. So
Yes.
holy cow. Well, sir, we wish you the best of luck. And if
Thank
there's
you.
anything we can ever do to help, and if you decide you're sitting on the boat and you're bored and you want to do this again from the boat, you ring us up and we'll do it.
It's the bandwidth, Bill.
Yeah.
We'll have to turn off the remote operators, and then I'll really be in trouble.
Yeah,
Yes,
no, I
yes.
understand. Yeah.
Yes, you will.
All righty. So
Okay.
we'll have a good evening. And Joe, I had the radar up. It looks like everything's going south of us, so we're going to be okay tonight.
Good. No tornadoes.
Oh, good.
Joe was within about 1,100 feet last night.
Yeah. Come close.
Yep.
Yeah.
So fortunately, nothing happened. So, Don, good luck to you, and
Thank you.
Godspeed, and let us know if we can help.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
Good night,
Joe,
Joe.
good to see you,
Good night,
buddy.
Bill.
We'll see you guys.
Okay.
I hope you found that as interesting as I did. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the DX Mentor. I would like to thank our sponsors, ICOM America, the Daily DX, DX Engineering, and the Southwest Ohio DX Association. You won't find anyone more committed to DX than these sponsors. I would especially like to thank our guests today, Don, N1DG, and Joe, W8GEX. I would love to have your feedback, answer your questions, and provide help with any DX or amateur-related issues that you may have. If you need clarification on something or you have a question, you can email me at thedxmentor@gmail.com. Please drop me a line if you have achieved an all-time new one, receive recognition, or you have a DX event that you would like us to mention. We would be happy to do that. If you're enjoying these DX Mentor episodes, please hit the subscribe button. You can also click like if you found this one particularly interesting. If you don't want to subscribe or it's just not your thing, that's okay, but drop me a note and let me know what you would like. 7-3 for this episode, and thanks to my ex-whale Karen for her love and support. I hope to see you in the pileups.